tonight? Where is everybody? Seems light. All right, hey, listen up. Okay, so over the next couple weeks, we're going to be starting a new series. We're starting a new series tonight. We're going to be talking about God Did It. All right? This is a series that's going to be focused on the testimonies. The testimonies that are in the Bible, the testimonies that you and I have, and what we can share. That's going to be over the next several weeks. We're going to be talking about the miracles that happen in the Bible. And so we're going to pick 4 different stories to talk about and how God changed the lives of the people that were in this story. And so that's what we're going to be talking about over the next several weeks. My question, though, is, have you ever heard this phrase, "It wasn't me, it was God"? Have you guys ever heard that before? In the Christian world, we hear this all the time, and it's not a bad thing. This is not something that I'm honestly where it's oh, we shouldn't say that. This is a good thing, because what that means, it's saying, whoever's saying this is saying, you know what, it wasn't something I did myself. It was that God changed a situation. God showed up in a situation, and he moved, and he did something. So that's what it means whenever people say, "It wasn't me, it was God." It wasn't me, it was God. And so that's what that phrase means. And so once again, I hear that a lot in church. We say that a lot. We say like, "Oh, you know what? It wasn't something I did. It was just purely God. God showed up and he did amazing things." And so this is what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks. We're going to focus on this. We're going to focus on the miracles that God did. We're going to focus on the events that only God can explain, that only God used and only God can do. And it's only explained by God. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of weeks. And before we do that, let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, tonight as we settle in and as we look at your word and as we focus on the miracles, God, that we know that you provided in the Bible. God, I pray that right now that as we settle in to receive your word, and as we start focusing on what you did and how you're moving and what you're doing in our lives, God, I pray that, God, our eyes and our ears and our hearts and our minds would be open to what you have for us, not only tonight, but over the next several weeks. And God, that you would allow us to be able to be in tune with these stories. God, I pray that we'd be able to apply that to our lives and be able to see how miraculous your wonders are and how amazing you are and how these stories can really touch our lives and can impact us. God, we're so thankful for you. We're thankful for just the amazing testimonies that are going to come out of this. God, we love you. We know you pray. Amen. All right. So, my question to start out tonight. What miracles have you experienced or seen in your life? Have you experienced a miracle? Have you experienced something where you're like, I can't explain this other than the fact that it's God? What I want to do is I want to start out tonight and I want to clarify something for you. I want to clarify what exactly is a true miracle. Because we have a tendency to think like miracles can be, yes, they can be very small and they can be very big in our life. It can be something that we look at and say, well, you know what, I think it's something that maybe I did myself, but maybe God helped me with this. That's not a miracle. Miracles are one that you can look at and say, it is completely defined that God moved and God showed me something that was absolutely 100% him. That is a miracle. And so I want to start out tonight and I want to talk about what does the Bible, how does the Bible define a miracle? It says miracles provide evidence of God's presence and power in the world and demonstrates his authority on behalf of his servants. A miracle may be performed directly by God or through a human agent. Other words used to describe miracles in the Bible are signs and wonders. Typically, they're together, powers, and mighty works. That is how the Bible defines what a miracle is. So I'm going to ask you again, what miracles have you experienced or seen in your life? Some of you, it's okay to sit here and say, I don't know if I've ever experienced a miracle. That's okay. I'm not looking for you to say, well, let me make one up, or I think maybe this is a miracle. It's okay for you to sit here and say, I don't really have a miracle, or I haven't seen a miracle happen. It's okay. Buckle up, because you will. Because God's going to show up in amazing ways in your life and the lives of people around you. And you're going to be able to look back and you're going to be able to see, like, my goodness, God, you really moved in this. And there's no other explanation other than the fact that you were here and you helped me. So, have you ever faced an impossible situation that completely stumped you? That can be defined as a miracle. Something that you look back on and you say, I don't know how that was even possible. I don't know how I got out of that situation. I don't know how a family member was healed. I don't know how I got through this. That's a miracle. That is something that God can only do. You know, there was a story. There's a friend of mine that goes to the Chambersburg campus. His name is Gary. Gary, he went through a pretty difficult time with cancer. And the whole campus, we were praying for Gary. And we were talking about, Gary was going through the point where they were only giving him months to live. And he was okay with it. It was, honestly, I have a new respect for him because of the way that he handled this. He was at peace with dying. He was at peace with understanding that his life was going to be short. But he also knew that the only place that he could put his trust was in Jesus Christ. The only place that he could truly look back and say, that he could look and say, you know what? No, the only way I'm going to get through this is with a miracle. He defied the odds, and he went through physical pain. He went through chemo. He went through all of these different things to extend his life. But the doctors are still saying, you know what, it's only going to be months. And the whole time he was going through this, honestly, we were sitting back saying, you know what, we don't know if we have days, weeks, months with Gary. And he was sitting here. His family was so incredible through all this because they were looking at him saying, you know, he was a grandfather, he was a dad, he was an uncle. And they're looking at him saying, we know that our time is short with you, and so we want to spend every moment that we can with you. And this went on for months and months and months and months to where the doctors kept on saying, you don't have much time left. And as he continued going through chemo and as he continued going through the radiation, the cancer was all through him. And eventually it started to shrink. Little by little. And he started to get really good signs where they're like, you know what? We don't know how this is happening, but the cancer that we thought was going to take your life is now shrinking to the point where you now have, instead of months, now we think you probably have a year. And then after a year, they're like, you know, I think you probably have a little bit longer. And it continued to where his time was extended. And Gary, the whole time, he kept on saying, God will provide. God did this. God did this. God is providing me more time with my family. This was a miracle. This was a miracle that we noticed and we saw in Shippensburg. Gary's still living, years later. And I will tell you now that he does have cancer. It did come back. But he is so content with where he's at. He's like, God gave me an extra couple years to be with my family, to see my grandchildren grow. That was one of his biggest prayers, is because he's like, you know what? I want to be able to see my grandchildren grow up. I want to see, I think his daughter, his daughter-in-law was pregnant, and he's like, I just want to see this grandchild. He had that opportunity. So now he looks back and he's like, you know what, I'm so thankful. And I know this is hard to believe, but he's like, I can die in peace. Because God gave him time. He had extra time. God did it. When it comes to impossible situations, we try to fix it We try to fix it ourselves by saying, okay, no, but let me do something. Let me step in. Let me try to figure this out. Let me do whatever I have to do. And we continue to put this in ourselves, and we say, you know what, no, I'm going to fix this, instead of saying, God, I need you to fix this. Gary was at the point in his life where he's like, there is nothing else I can do other than just completely rely on God. There is nothing else I can do. How many times do we get into situations in our lives and we're like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get through this, and I'm just going to completely rely on God. I would love to sit up here and tell you that I do this on a daily basis. I don't. Because for me, I'm structured, I'm wired to the point where I'm like, okay, well, let me see what I can do, and let me see if I can fix it. God tells us to do the exact opposite. God says we have to completely rely on Him. We have to trust in Him. Many times we try to solve it ourselves. We believe we know better, even whenever we can't figure out the right way to fix a situation. What we need to learn is that we need to completely rely on God, because God can do it. We can't. This is where we get the title of God Did It. Because there's no other way we can explain it. When we come up against impossible, we need to understand that God is possible. When we come up against the impossible, we need to understand that God is possible. When you come up in a situation, you're like, I literally have no clue how I'm going to get through this. God's saying, I literally have the answers for you. And I will help you walk through that. It may not be the way that you think. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. That it may not look the way that you want it to. But God's still sitting there saying, it's still possible because I'm still here. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to Luke 18. I've heard of this verse is actually very popular, and it becomes a lot of people's life verses. Because Luke 18, verse 27, it says, Jesus replied, what is impossible for people is possible with God. Jesus says, what is impossible for people is possible with God. People will fail. You will fail on your own. Because people are flawed human beings. We are flawed human beings. So when we look at this and we say, God, I know that this is impossible because I'm going to put my trust in some other people. I'm going to put my trust in my parents. I'm going to put my trust in my youth leaders. I'm going to put my trust in Pastor Lawrence. I'm going to put my trust in whoever else you want to add to that story. And God's sitting there saying, it is impossible for people to do anything, but it is absolutely possible for God to step in to be able to help, just like Gary's story. Tonight we're going to focus on a very famous story in the Bible that I believe talks about this miracle. It talks about the fact that a gentleman tried this for years. He tried so hard to overcome life's struggles, and he couldn't do it himself. Turn to John 5, and we're going to read verse 1 through 9. The story begins, it says, after Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days, inside the city near the sheep gate was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, lay on the porches. One of the men laying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, would you like to get well? I can't, sir, the sick man said, for I have no one to put me in the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat, and began walking. I want you to understand the magnitude of this story. Because he had been laying there for 38 years. He had been sitting there for 38 years looking for his miracle. For 38 years. What I love about this verse, though, is that Jesus did not simply heal him by saying, hey, you over there, hey, yeah, you're healed, go ahead and stand up and walk. Instead, he went over and he spoke to him, and he simply asked the question, would you like to get well? Do you want to get well? Because at this point, you have to understand, back in this day, whenever you had sick people like this, whenever you had people that were so ill, or they were paralyzed, or they had leprosy, or any of the other illnesses that were there, they were considered to be shameful. They were considered to be dirty. And so nobody talked to them. Nobody would ever come near them. And so for Jesus to come over to this man and say, do you want to be healed? That was unheard of. And his man just simply said, sir, I would love to, but I can't get to the pool. It was faith in Christ that healed him that day and not the pool. I want to tell you something about the pool of Bethesda. Because it says in here, it says that the water bubbled up. I was curious about this, so we did some research, and I found out that the reason why the water bubbled up is that there were people back then, they believed that these were angels. They believed that whenever the water would bubble, that they would rush to the pool, and they would throw whoever was sick into the pool. They'd say, hey, you know what? Throw him in here, he's going to be healed. Do you know what caused the bubbling? There was a north pool, and there was a south pool. They were sitting like this. And whenever the water in the south pool would start to get low, they would open up the floodgates and allow the water from the north to come down and actually fill up the south pool. And whenever that happened, the water would bubble up. So this was man-made. But these people would sit by this pool and wait. They waited for that water to rise and wait for that for the bubbles. And so whenever it says that this man would sit there and he waited for the water to bubble, it was completely man-made. But yet they put their trust in the water, believing that this water had healing powers, believed that this water would heal them. He put his faith in the water instead of putting his faith in God. I believe that's so important for us to understand that. Another thing that I thought was amazing in this verse was the fact that he said, someone else gets there first. Someone else gets there first. That means there was agitation there. He was upset because at that point, somebody else would take his blessing. Somebody else would come in, and just as he would get there, somebody else would jump in. You know what? I got it. You didn't get the blessing. Because he stated that. He said someone else would get there first. And I can only imagine how angry he was at that point. Everyone else gets their healing. Everyone else gets their blessings. Everyone else gets the miracles. Does this sound familiar? Because I can tell you, each and every one of us do this all the time. Where we say, well, why does this person have that? Why does this person have this? Why does this person's grandfather get healed? Why does that person's parent, why are they not getting a divorce? We have a tendency to look around and we say, why? Why do they get all of the cool things? We look at other people's blessings. We look at other people's healings and their miracles. And we say, we don't have that. We want to relate this to the story. We see other people have the miracle water, and we're laying there angry. And I can tell you there was actually that same thing happened in Shippensburg again, because we talked about Gary. And this same time, there was a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, her name was Rhonda. And Rhonda was going through treatment for chemo as well. And so literally the same time, they were parallel. They were both going through treatment. Gary started to get well, and Rhonda started to lose her battle with cancer. And we saw this miracle of Gary and this amazing story that God did this. And then we saw Rhonda literally sitting right beside him. Actually, she always sat like 3 or 4 rows behind him. And she's gone through the point where she can barely walk. She went through cancer, and it took her life. And I was talking to her husband one day, and he was a very dear friend of mine. And he said, I don't understand. He said, I'm looking at Gary, looking at this gentleman, not taking anything away from Gary, but he's like, but Gary received the blessing of several more years, many more years, and God took my wife. I had no answers for him. But I can tell you there was a reason for it. There was a reason why God did it, and God didn't. But I can tell you that we trust and we believe in a God that's bigger than our understanding. And that's what I told my friend. And even though it's really, really hard for him to understand, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't understand it. Some people receive miracles, some people receive healings, other people don't. I still trust in the God of healing. I want you to see this video tonight. This will give you an idea of this story. Because I believe it's important for us to be able to visualize what Jesus did and how this gentleman responded.
Shalom.
Me?
Yes.
Shalom.
I have a question for you.
For me. I don't have many answers, but I'm listening.
Do you want to be healed?
Who are you?
We'll get to that later. But my question remains.
Will you take me to the water? Look, I'm having a really bad day.
You've been having a bad day for a long time. So?
Sir, I have no one to help me into the water when it's stirred up. And when I do get close, the others step down in front of me. And so,
Look at me. Look at me. That's not what I asked. I'm not asking you about who's helping you, or who's not helping, or who's getting in your way. I'm asking about you.
I've tried.
For a long time, I know. And you don't want false hope again, I understand. But this pool, it has nothing for you. It means nothing. And you know it. But you're still here. Why?
I don't know.
You don't need this pool. You only need me. So, do you want to be healed? So let's go. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk.
I'm free to walk, like he said. Don't forget your bed.
Why does this matter?
Because you're not coming back here. That life is over. Everything changes now.
Everything changes now. One thing I think is amazing with this story is the fact that God did it, not the water. It wasn't what the water did. It wasn't the fact that he begged for Jesus to take him to the water, and Jesus was like, no, you just need to trust in me. Trust in me, and you will be healed. I believe there's a powerful lesson with this. When we acknowledge all that God can do, rather than try to solve our own issues, he makes the impossible possible. But we truly have to acknowledge him, and we have to be able to say with our voice, Jesus, we are going to trust in you. We're not going to trust in ourselves. We're not going to trust in the water. We're not going to trust in our parents, anything else. We're just solely going to trust in what can God do in our lives. So how do we apply this? I believe that for us to say God did it, we have to be able to say, what is God doing? Or what did God do? Or what he did. I believe for us to be able to say God did it, we need to be able to speak it out loud. Just like in the story, he literally had to speak it out. And a miracle happened. Because Jesus acknowledged this man, but he acknowledged this man, but then he also said, you need to speak it. It wasn't for him to just say, okay, you know what, you're healed, go ahead and stand up, and we're all good, and you can go ahead and walk on your way. No, he literally had to speak it out of his mouth. Jesus asked him twice, he said, do you want to be healed? And he was waiting for an answer. He was waiting for him to literally speak out of his mouth and be able to tell him, yes, I want to be healed. And Jesus said, then get up and walk. Because he spoke it out. So, here's a challenge for you tonight. We want to hear your story. I want to hear your story. Because I believe that miracles happen. I believe that there are things in your life, I believe that whether you're a student or whether you're an adult, that you've seen miracles happen. And I believe it's important for us to be able to tell our story. And so here's 3 things that I want you to think about. Where has God come through for you? How is he changing you? And the big one, what did God do this past weekend for those of you who are at the retreat? Because I saw and I heard a lot of stories. God did it. God changed you. And so I believe that for us, I believe it's important that you speak it out so that way we can hear you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for you guys to tell your story. And for those of you that were at the retreat, do you remember the ovation? We're going to do that. So whenever someone comes and tells their story, I want to see you do that. For those of you who weren't at the retreat, you'll catch on. But I believe it's important for us to be able to hear what happened or what's happening. So, I need a microphone. Josh, can you give me a microphone?